Hello and welcome to Speak the Words. I'm Shawn.
And I'm Mango.
And this is a show where I, Shawn, am walking Mango through the story of the Stormlight Archives, a book series by Brandon Sanderson, and it's going pretty well. I am somebody who has read almost all of Brandon Sanderson's works, and Mango, you've read like nothing.
Yep.
So that's fun.
I've read like 3 chapters of Mistborn, but that's not Stormlight, so whatever.
No, it's not. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, that's the premise of this show. Mango, what did we do last time?
Last time we read the little interlude chapters. One of them was about Shalon's brother.
Yes.
One of them was about Zeth. And the third one was about a guy in this, like, swampy area who came across some travelers that Shawn explained to me were actually from other worlds. So
Yes. I would describe the Pure Lakes as more paradisey than swamp.
I just remembered always is wet, so swamp.
Lots of wet, lots of water. So definitely I can see where that would come from. Last time we went through some nice fun little interludes, and now, oh boy, we're back into it. We are starting part 2 this week, which is titled The Illuminating Storms. The POVs for this part are Dalinar, Kaladin, and Adolin. We have a little map to start us off, Mango, and I'm going to send this map to you, as I normally do. And this might help with some of your visualization of what's going on a little bit. So don't worry about the writing at the bottom. I have that written down, and I'll read it aloud in a minute. But what do you see image-wise?
It looks like a lot of rocks.
Yes. So this is the prime...
Wait, let me guess. Is this like... Okay. You know how out in the desert it looks like the dirt is all cracked and crumbly and stuff? Because that's what this looks like to me.
It does. It does look like that. This is a prime map of the Shattered Plains. So this is where Kaladin is. All those little cracks are where he has to put the bridges down for them to cross the plateaus.
Yikes.
So, and those on the left, you see there's the 10 war camps. Those are the Alethi war camps. And Kaladin is situated in one of them. I'm not sure exactly which one is Sadeas's. So this is the prime map of the Shattered Plains. In the east, one can clearly note the tower, which is the largest plateau of the area, and the war camps are visible in the west. Glyph pairs and plateau numbers have been removed to preserve the clarity of this smaller reproduction of the original hanging in His Majesty Elokar's Gallery of Maps. And that's what the text at the bottom reads. If anybody ever is curious about the images that we're looking at, I post them on Twitter with the episodes. So just at Stormlight Speaks, I think, right? Did I get that right? At Stormlight Speaks. At Speaks Stormlight. Thank you. I should write that down somewhere, shouldn't I? That'd be helpful. At Speak Stormlight. If you guys go there, every episode I post a little image thread with what we are looking at.
I don't even run the Twitter, and I still remembered that better than you.
Yeah, my memory
Come on,
is...
Shawn.
I don't know how we do this if I didn't take notes.
We wouldn't.
We wouldn't. No, we wouldn't. It'd be impossible. The next chapter, chapter 12, the first chapter of part 2, is titled Unity. We have a new chapter symbol, and I'll send that to you. And this symbol is the crest of House Kholin. And this is the symbol for both Dalinar and Adolin. They do not get 2 separate chapter symbols.
F.
The epigraph for this first chapter, we're starting off part 2, and this is my favorite set of epigraphs in the whole book. This epigraph for chapter 12 reads, Old friend, I hope this missive finds you well, though, as you are now essentially immortal, I would guess that wellness on your part is something of a given. And that's it. It is the beginning of a letter, and we will get the rest of the letter as we go through part 2. So, this chapter starts in Adolin Kalin's point of view, and before we get into this, I'm gonna go ahead and run us through the Kalin family tree, because it's really important for the rest of these books. These are major characters in these books. You don't need to remember them immediately, but I just want to get it all out there so that as I'm saying these names, they can start to sink into people's minds. So, I'm going to split the Kalin family into like 2 branches. The first branch is Gavilar. Okay? Gavilar, who was the king who was assassinated, obviously, in the prologue by Szeth. Gavilar was married to Navani Kalin, and they had 2 kids. Yasna is the eldest, and Elokar is the youngest, and he is king now, since Gavilar died. Mm. Dalinar and his wife, insert name here, had 2 kids. Adolin and Renarin. Adolin is the oldest, and Renarin is the youngest. Or younger one, I guess. And to get this out of the way for later, and to kind of maybe tease a little bit for later, just remember, Navani married Dalinar's brother. They are not siblings. Okay, I can't stress this enough. Dalinar and Gavilar are related, and Navani married the brother. Okay, that's gonna be important later. Just remember that. It's gonna save questions.
Okay.
Anyways, this chapter starts with Adolin, who is Adolin, who is on a chasm fiend hunt with Dalinar, Renarin, Elokar, and Sadeas. And Sadeas is the high prince that owns Kaladin. Also joined by another high prince named Vama, but he's not super important just yet. Adolin can't stand Sadeas, who is sucking up to King Elokar, and he's also taking shots at Dalinar for being weak. Renarin is a more soft-spoken and thoughtful person than his older brother, and wants to keep Adolin away from Sadeas. We get a little explanation of Shard Plate, which we'd previously seen Gavilar wearing in the prologue when he fought Szeth, and Adolin is wearing it, and he says that it increases his speed, strength, and dexterity. He makes a point that he has to be careful when reaching for his water, because he's afraid he'll crush it, because he's still not used to the Shard Plate. They also take the time to describe the different people's Shard Plate, and pretty much the point of this is they show that everybody has their plate painted a different color, except for Dalinar, who kept his a natural gray. They described Dalinar as having short black hair that was gray at the temples. He had a warrior's face and wasn't conventionally attractive. He rode a special horse called a Rhyshadium and had a reputation as one of the greatest warriors and generals who ever lived. Adolin thinks his father isn't living up to that reputation and reveals that Dalinar is haunted by visions during the high storms. He falls to the floor and begins to shake, and then he would rave in gibberish and often stand up and start swinging and flailing. Adolin often has to restrain Dalinar during the visions. And then, once the visions are done, Dalinar will often mention the Knights Radiant. And I'm going to read this bit directly from the book. It all made Adolin sick. Dalinar was the Blackthorn, a genius of the battlefield and a living legend. Together, he and his brother had reunited Alethkar's warring high princes after centuries of strife. He had defeated countless challengers in duels, had won dozens of battles, the entire kingdom looked up to him, and now this. What did you do as a son when the father you loved, the greatest man alive, started to lose his wits? So right away, there's tension in this family. There's some serious shit going down. Adolin worried that Sadeas was planning to strike at Dalinar, but he tries to stay relaxed and confident for Renarin. Adolin describes himself as the kind of person who's spent most of his life dueling, lounging, and courting girls. King Elokar commends Sadeas on his recent performance, and Sadeas takes the opportunity to throw another slide at Dalinar. Adolin gets upset and even holds out his hand to summon his shard blade, but Renarin distracts him by talking about the hunt that they were on. Adolin found the hunts boring and didn't see a real challenge to them. He preferred dueling. Renarin comments that Adolin should have brought a girl with him to keep himself from getting all pissy with Sadeas. But Adolin had just messed up very publicly with a girl the other day, and his relationships tended to end quickly. Usually it wasn't his fault, he says, but he also says that this time it definitely was his fault. We jump to Dalinar's point of view, and the words "unite them" whispered in Dalinar's mind. The king complained about how long it was taking them to travel, and challenges Dalinar to a race. Without waiting for a response, the king rides off, and Dalinar chases after him, leaving Adolin in command of the army. Dalinar let himself enjoy the race and quickly blazed ahead of Elhokar. He reached the rock formation they were racing to and leapt from his horse, grabbing the side of the rock, then starting to climb. And I'm again going to quote directly from the book right here. He says, "The thrill of contest began to rise within him. It wasn't nearly as keen as the thrill of battle, but it was a worthy substitute." And this is of note because thrill is capitalized with a T. Like the T is capitalized.
Oh.
Dalinar was about to win, the thrill singing to him, when he heard the words again, "Unite them." He hesitated and allowed Elhokar to win. Elhokar congratulated him on a good race, and Dalinar noted how the victory had been good for Elhokar. He says that little golden spheres, glory spren, appeared around Elhokar. Below them, the Cobalt Guard, which is House Kulin's elite guard, and Sadeas rode up. Dalinar notes that Sadeas doesn't have... he's not a full shard bearer. He has shard plate, but no shard blade. Dalinar looks out over the Shadowed Plains and feels this. He has this feeling that he's been here before, but that feeling fades in a heartbeat. Elhokar pointed out towards their destination, a large cloth pavilion on one of the plateaus. It was on one of Dalinar's plateaus, which made the wealth at the heart of the Chasm Fiend his to hunt. Dalinar mentions that the race had made him feel like he was youth, chasing after Elhokar's father again, and the mention of Gavilar makes Elhokar upset. He feels often that others compare him unfavorably to his father, and he was right. They do. Dalinar complains about how they rode off in a war zone, and Elhokar dismisses him, saying that the Parshendi haven't been on this side of the plains in years. Dalinar points out that Elhokar is unafraid of the Parshendi, but has a deep paranoia of assassination. Dalinar still felt guilty over Gavilar's death, and he tells Elhokar that he looked into some trespassers that Elhokar claimed to have seen and found nothing. Elhokar insists that someone is watching him from the darkness, and Dalinar takes Elhokar's safety very seriously. He says that he would see his nephew was protected. The familiarity that Dalinar had felt earlier returned. Dalinar had stood on a formation like this during his first vision, and then I'm again going to quote directly from the book here. "You must unite them," the strange booming words had spoken to him. "You must prepare. Build of your people a fortress of strength and peace, a wall to resist the winds. Cease squabbling and unite. The Everstorm comes." So this is the second mention of the Everstorm. We've heard of it once before in one of the death rattles. Well, they're called death rattles. One of the epigraphs from part 1 mentioned that the Everstorm was coming. Dalinar considered saying something to Elhokar, and he thought his visions came from the Almighty, that the Alethi should withdraw from the Shattered Plains and return to Alethkar. He just tells Elhokar that they should return to the others. We jump back to Adolin's point of view, where Adolin had stopped thinking about his father and Sadeas, and now he was trying to figure out how to explain his falling out with a girl named Rila in a sympathetic way to another girl named Janala. He thought he should have invited Janala along on the hunt, and he thought that fighting a great shell would have been more interesting if someone beautiful and long-haired were watching. And yeah, that's Adolin. That is how he thinks. Renarin asks Adolin if all the soldiers were necessary, and Adolin says they aren't, but Dalinar will want them anyway. Adolin looked up as Elhokar leapt down from the top of the rock formation. It was high enough that it was still considered dangerous even to a shard bearer. Dalinar climbed down a little before leaping after the king. Adolin thought his father took safer pathways more often lately and found more reasons to give Adolin command of the army. Adolin went off to get a report from the rear guard, riding past Sadius's party. They were dressed in casual clothing, which made Adolin jealous. Even if Adolin hadn't been wearing shard plate, he would have had to wear his uniform. The Alethi war codes commanded it. Nobody followed the codes except for Dalinar and his sons. Sadius's men made fun of Dalinar having to chase after Elhokar and commented that it's been a long time since Dalinar won a Gemheart. His father's interpretations of the codes wouldn't allow Adolin to challenge a man while he was on duty, so he ignored them. He felt that there was some truth to what they said, though. Adolin takes a second to explain how Alethkar is actually organized, and he says that the Alethi princedoms were like kingdoms unto themselves, still mostly autonomous despite having accepted Gavilar as king. Elhokar had inherited the throne, and Dalinar, by right, had taken the Kholin princedom as his own. However, most of the high princes gave only token nods to the paramount rule of the king. That left Elhokar without land that was specifically his own. He tended to act like a high prince of the Kholin princedom, taking great interest in its day-to-day management. So while Dalinar should have been a ruler unto himself, he instead bent to Elhokar's whims and dedicated his resources to protecting his nephew. That made him weak in the eyes of the others, nothing more than a glorified bodyguard. So, Elhokar is king in title, and everybody's like, yeah, we follow him. But, like... like... They all kind of run their own... I mean, you could kind of think of it as the United States, as the US, right? Where we have the individual states and then we have the federal government. But, like, if the federal government had almost no power, and the states decided everything.
You mean the way it was supposed to be?
Yes. The way they really wanted it at the beginning. It is the Founding Fathers' dream. While the others fought, Dalinar and his sons spent more time in bureaucratic administration. Adolin wanted to be out there fighting, killing Parshendi. Dalinar wasn't weak, he was just troubled. Adolin approached the king, and Sadius was there. He was jealous that Adolin had a blade while he had none. Adolin delivers a scout report to Elhokar, who complains that he doesn't need to know every little detail of the army. Adolin says that there is no sign of the Parshendi, and Elhokar wants to ride off ahead. Dalinar refuses, saying that it would undermine the whole point of bringing the army. Elhokar yields and begins to hold court on the plateau. Adolin wished he could join them, but went to join his father, who was standing looking out towards the origin, the place where high storms began. Renarin was with him. Renarin wore a side sword, but he barely knew how to use it. His blood weakness made it difficult for him to practice fighting. Renarin is my favorite character. I love Renarin. Adolin suggests to Dalinar that Elhokar was right and they should move on quickly. He wanted the hunt over with. Dalinar doesn't understand why Adolin wasn't excited by a hunt. Dalinar mentions that the chasm fiends grow to 50 feet tall, and Adolin says that they will kill them from afar, making it boring. There was no challenge. Dalinar admits that it can be tedious, but that the king was insistent. And I'm gonna read directly from the book again, just because, oh my gosh, this little exchange they have between the three of them, I think perfectly sums up the dynamic between them. And it starts with Renarin. He says, "You're still smarting over the problems with Rila, Adolin. You were eager a week ago. You really should have invited Janala." Janala hates hunts, thinks they're barbarous, Adolin replied. Dalinar frowned. Janala? Who's Janala? Daughter of Bright Lord Lustow, Adolin said. And you're courting her? Not yet, but I've sure been trying. What happened to that other girl? The short one, with the fondness for silver hair ribbons. Deely? Adolin asked. Father, I stopped courting her over 2 months back. You did? Yes. There have been 2 between her and Janala, father, Adolin noted. You really need to pay more attention. Almighty help any man who tries to keep track of your tangled courtship, son. The most recent was Rila, Renarin said. Dalinar frowned. And you two had some problems yesterday, Adolin said. He coughed, determined to change the subject. So I love Adolin's relaxed lifestyle and Dalinar's inability to keep up.
Head empty, only girls.
Exactly. That is exactly who Adolin is, actually, yes. Later on in the books, they reveal that he's really into fashion. Adolin is a great character. I love Adolin.
Wow.
Adolin comments that it was odd for Elhokar to be so insistent on hunting chasm fiends when he was such a paranoid man. Dalinar says that Elhokar worries that his subjects see him as a coward, so he finds other ways to prove his courage. He says that Elhokar is still learning to lead and needs to prove himself and to others that he's strong enough. Adolin wondered how the others couldn't see his father's wisdom. Dalinar says that Elhokar is a better man than others give him credit for, and could be a great king if Dalinar could convince him to leave the Shadowed Plains, and Adolin goes, "What the fuck did you just say?" Dalinar says that he has to unite Alethkar, that the Shadowed Plains divide the Alethi, and that the others worry too much about winning wealth and prestige. Adolin argues that that was the core of the Alethi, and he asked why Dalinar would abandon the Vengeance Pact, the pact the High Princes had made to avenge Gavilar. Dalinar says that some things are more important than vengeance. He says that he loved Gavilar and misses him fiercely, that he hates the Parshendi for what they'd done, but that Gavilar's life work had been to unite Alethkar. He says that he won't let it break apart. Adolin says that the Alethi should stop playing their games and march against the Parshendi in force. Dalinar considers that an option. Adolin tells Dalinar not to bring this up to Elhokar, and Dalinar says that he'll think about it before dismissing Adolin. The party continued onward, Renarin trying to engage with Adolin, but Adolin is very distracted. He was jealous of the men who had gotten to fight with Dalinar before he'd changed. He hoped that if the Parshendi were defeated, his father would return to the man he'd once been. Up ahead, Dalinar spoke to Sadeas quietly. They had been friends once, but that changed with Gavilar's death. Eventually, they arrived at the hunt site. Adolin joined Dalinar, who was waiting for the king to cross the final bridge. They were about to cross when Adolin saw a lone rider moving across the plains. Adolin expected a messenger and pointed out the rider to Dalinar, but it was not a messenger. It was Wit. The best fucking character in all of Stormlight. And I'm gonna, again, just rip a lot from the book because I cannot do Wit justice without it. So, the king's Wit was tall and thin. He wore a stiff black coat and black trousers, a color matched by his hair. Though he wore a long, thin sword tied to his waist, as far as Adolin knew, the man had never drawn it. It was mostly symbolic. Wit nodded to them as he approached, wearing one of those keen smiles of his. He had blue eyes, but he wasn't really a light eyes. Nor was he a dark eyes. He was the king's Wit. That was a category all its own. "Ah, young Prince Adolin," Wit exclaimed. "You actually managed to pry yourself away from the camp's young women long enough to join this hunt. I'm impressed." Adolin chuckled uncomfortably. "Well, that's been a topic of some discussion lately." Wit raised an eyebrow. Adolin sighed. Wit would find out eventually anyway. It was virtually impossible to keep anything from the man. "I made a lunch appointment with one woman yesterday, but I was courting another, and she's the jealous type. So now neither will speak with me." And Wit says, "It's a constant source of amazement that you get yourself into such messes, Adolin. Each one is more exciting than the previous." And Adolin's just like, "Yeah, exciting. That's exactly how it feels." And Wit laughs. The king's Wit was not a silly court fool such as one might find in other kingdoms. He was a sword, a tool maintained by the king. Insulting others was beneath the dignity of the king, so just as one used gloves when forced to handle something vile, the king retained a wit, so he didn't have to debase himself to the level of rudeness or offensiveness. This Wit had been in the position for a few months. There was something different about him. He knew more than he should. Wit nodded to Dalinar. "Your lordship?" "Wit," Dalinar said stiffly. "And young Prince Renarin." Renarin kept his eyes down. "No greeting for me, Renarin?" Wit said, amused. Renarin said nothing. "He thinks you'll mock him if he speaks to you," Wit, Adolin said. "Earlier this morning he told me he'd determined not to say anything around you." "Wonderful!" Wit exclaimed. "Then I can say whatever I wish and he'll not object." Renarin hesitated. Wit leaned in to Adolin. "Have I told you about the night Prince Renarin and I had 2 days back, walking the streets of the war camp? We came across these 2 sisters, you see, blue-eyed and—" "That's a lie," Renarin said, blushing. "Very well," Wit said without missing a beat. "I'll confess, there were actually 3 sisters, but Prince Renarin quite unfairly ended up with 2 of them, and I didn't want to diminish my reputation by—" "Wit," Dalinar was stern as he cut in. The black-clad man looked to him. "Perhaps you should restrict your mockery to those who deserve it," Dalinar said. "Bright Lord Dalinar, I believe that was what I was doing." Dalinar never liked Wit. Picking on Renarin was an easy way to upset Dalinar. Adolin thought Wit was almost always good-natured with Renarin. Wit moved past the group, whispering to Dalinar, "Those who deserve my mockery are those who can benefit from it, Bright Lord Dalinar. That one is less fragile than you think him." Adolin says he likes Wit, Renarin says he finds him unnerving, and Dalinar says nothing. They cross the bridge and pass Wit, who is tormenting a group of officers. And that is Wit, and I I love Wit so much.
I love him already.
I figured. The three of them join the king and the huntmaster Bashan, who approached as well. He tells them that they just tossed down the bait. Elhokar asks how long it will take, and Bashan says about 2 or 3 hours. He takes the king's horse, and 2 grooms take Dalinar and Adolin's Vishadium. Bashan points to the spot where the actual fighting will be happening, away from the spectators. Once the Chasm Fiend takes the bait and climbs up, they'll distract it with hogs and fire arrows at it. They brought shard bows that only shard bearers could pull back. They were recent creations by Alethi engineers, though through the use of fabrial science. Each required a small infused gemstone. Adolin's Aunt Navani, not by blood, Aunt Navani had led the research to develop the bows. Adolin wished Navani had never left. Things were never boring with her. Adolin didn't like the term shard bow. Shards was special, relics from another time. Bashan tells Dalinar that they'll have a good hunt. The Chasm Fiend is larger than any other they've hunted before. Bashan tells them to go for the legs on the Chasm Fiend, then notices one of the trolls walking away from the chasm, and Adolin goes, something seems very wrong. And then I'm just going to read this from the end of the chapter. Bashan, Dalinar said, his voice suddenly alarmed. Shouldn't there be bait on the end of that beast's rope? The huntmaster froze. The rope the Chull was towing was frayed at the end. Something dark, something mind-numbingly enormous, rose out of the chasm on thick chitinous legs? Crab legs. It climbed onto the plateau, not the small plateau where the hunt was supposed to take place, but the viewing plateau where Dalinar and Adolin stood. The plateau filled with attendants, unarmed guests, female scribes, and unprepared soldiers. Oh, damnation, Bashan said. And that is the end of chapter 12.
Oh?
There's a lot in there. It's very dense. But you met Adolin, Renarin, and Dalinar. You got a little bit of Elhokar. He's a little bit of a... Elhokar is a special kind of king. In the nicest way to put that.
Is he just really dumb?
Elhokar is very not confident in himself. He's also very paranoid, as both Adolin and Dalinar said. And he's kind of whiny. He's like, are we there yet? And people don't really like him, which is unfortunate for him. Besides that, I don't think there's anything really I want to grab from that chapter besides just us meeting all these characters.
Wit.
Wit. Yeah, Wit. Wit's great. Adolin's a himbo. Renarin's a nice shy boy. And Dalinar is a very strict veteran of war, I would say. And Elhokar's a whiny little brat. Chapter 13, 10 Heartbeats. Again, the Kholin symbol. And this epigraph reads, I realize that you are probably still angry. That is pleasant to know. Much as your perpetual health, I have come to rely upon your dissatisfaction with me. It is one of the Cosmere's great constants, I should think. And that is the epigraph for this part, or for this chapter. Dalinar started summoning his shard blade. It took 10 heartbeats. If his heart was racing, the time was shorter. If he was relaxed, it took longer. Dalinar ran towards the Chasm Fiend, pulling on his helmet. The Chasm Fiend smashed a bridge, sending people into the chasm below. The Parshendi called the Chasm Fiends gods. Elhokar yelled for the archers to fire, and Dalinar yelled for the soldiers to distract the Chasm Fiend from the unarmed. Dalinar's shard blade, Oathbringer, dropped into his hand, forming from mist. Elhokar yelled at the Chasm Fiend, his own shard blade Sunraiser appearing in his hand. He didn't want the monster to escape. Dalinar was more worried about the soldiers in attendance. Arrows hit the Chasm Fiend, only a few striking between its plates. Sadius called for his shard bow, but Dalinar couldn't wait for that. The bow would be too slow. Adolin charged past on Sureblood, his Rhyshadium. He'd gone running for his horse, unlike Dalinar, who had to follow Elhokar. The other horses panicked, but not the Rhyshadium. In a moment, Gallant was there beside Dalinar. Dalinar leapt onto the horse's saddle. Elhokar closed his helmet, and Dalinar told him to hang back while Adolin and him weakened it. Dalinar closed his own visor. The sides were translucent, but there was still a slit for the eyes at the front. Soldiers formed up, attempting to draw the monster away from the archers and attendants. Adolin rode left, and Dalinar took the right. They rode around the monster, slicing through its limbs. The monster had 14 legs. Dalinar heard the king shouting at the Chasm Fiend. The king was charging the monster blade out. Dalinar yelled for Elhokar to target the legs, and Elhokar ignores him, charging for the beast's chest.
This dumb bitch.
Dalinar rides towards Elhokar, who dodges out of the monster's blow. Elhokar tells Dalinar that he was trying to distract the monster. Dalinar tries to convince the king to let him be the distraction, but Elhokar ignores him. Dalinar went back to attacking the legs. Dalinar considered letting the monster escape instead of continuing the fight, and he called out to the king. Elhokar couldn't hear Dalinar and turned to ride towards him. As he turned, his saddle snapped and the king went tumbling through the air. Elhokar hit the ground and dropped his sword, causing it to disappear. Elhokar laid on the ground, a giant claw looming over him. Dalinar charged towards the king but wouldn't be quick enough. An enormous arrow slammed into the monster's head. Dalinar saw Sadius standing with his massive shard bow, readying another arrow. Dalinar raised his sword in salute, and Sadius raised his bow. They were not friends, and they did not like one another, but they would protect the king. That was the bond that united them. Dalinar rode past the king and yelled at him to get to safety. Elhokar nods and begins to move. The creature began to ignore Sadius' arrows, as Dalinar and Adolin took out 2 more legs. At this point, they'd taken out half of the legs. Elhokar yelled again. The king had not fled, and he was walking towards the beast, hand to his side. Dalinar rode towards him, and Elhokar summoned his blade, slamming it into the monster's chest, searching for its heart. The beast roared and shook Elhokar free, the king barely holding onto his sword. The creature's tail swung around and hit Gallant, sending Dalinar flying. He lost his sword and heard a distant voice calling to him. "Father!" Gallant hadn't broken a leg, luckily, but was bleeding and was favoring a leg. "Away!" Dalinar yelled. The horse retreated. Unlike Elhokar, it obeyed. The Chasm Fiend hit him with its tail again. Dalinar landed on his feet this time and charged towards Elhokar, summoning his blade. Renarin rode up beside Dalinar, calling out to him. He asked if he could help, and Dalinar yelled at him to get away, that he would just get himself killed. Renarin galloped away. Dalinar turned and ran toward Elhokar. Elhokar continued trying to hit the beast's lungs or heart, but it was difficult. Adolin had dismounted from his horse by the king and was defending him from the claws. One of the claws hit Adolin from behind and sent him flying. And I'm gonna read from the book a little bit here. Adolin rolled lethargically, hands moving. He was alive. No time to think about him now. Elhokar was alone. The beast struck, pounding the ground beside the king, knocking him off his feet. His blade vanished, and Elhokar fell face first onto the stones. Something changed inside of Dalinar. Reservations vanished. Other concerns became meaningless. His brother's son was in danger. He had failed Gavilar, had lain drunk in his wines while his brother fought for his life. Dalinar should have been there to defend him. Only 2 things remained of his beloved brother. 2 things that Dalinar could protect in a hope to earn some form of redemption. Gavilar's kingdom and Gavilar's son. Elhokar was alone and in danger. Nothing else mattered. And we go back to Adolin's point of view. Adolin came to and began to summon his shard blade. The Chasm Fiend prepared to strike the king, and Adolin knew if Elhokar died, Alethkar would fall apart. Adolin tried to stumble towards the king, then he saw his father. Dalinar charged towards the king with a speed and grace beyond a simple shard bearer. He leapt over rocks, slid under a claw, then leapt into the air again over a second claw. A third claw went for the king. Dalinar dropped his blade and raised his hands. He caught the claw, fell to his knees, but caught it. Storm father, Adolin thought, watching his father stand over the king, bowed beneath the enormous weight of a monster many times his size. Shocked archers hesitated. Sadeas lowered his bow. Adolin's breath caught in his chest. Dalinar held back the claw and matched its strength, a figure in dark, silvery metal that almost seemed to glow. The beast trumpeted above, and Dalinar bellowed back a powerful, defiant yell. In that moment, Adolin knew he was seeing him, the Blackthorn, the very man he'd been wishing he could fight alongside. The plate of Dalinar's gauntlets and shoulders began to crack, webs of light moving down the ancient metal. Adolin finally shook himself into motion. Adolin ran to the nearest leg and sliced through it with his shard blade. The creature toppled. Elhokar rose, and Dalinar nodded to Adolin. He pointed at the creature's neck, and Elhokar summoned his blade, slamming it into the creature's neck, killing it. Adolin approached the two men as Elhokar hacked away at the Chasm Fiend's chest. He reached into the chest, searching for something. He ripped free the beast's gem heart, the enormous gemstone that grew within all Chasm Fiends. It was lumpy and uncut, but it was a pure emerald and as big as a man's head. It was the largest gem heart Adolin had ever seen, and even the small ones were worth a fortune. Elhokar held up the prize, golden glory spread appearing around him, and the soldiers yelled in triumph. And that is the end of chapter 13. Dalinar's a badass.
Oh. I get the feeling that there's more to Dalinar than we think. That, or he's just really powerful.
Did you notice that when I described the Kholin family tree and I talked about Dalinar's wife, I said insert name here?
Yes.
I did that for a reason, and we'll get to that. But there is definitely more to Dalinar than meets the eye. There's a lot more to Dalinar than meets the eye. Chapter 14, Payday. And it's Kaladin's symbol, so we're back with Kaladin.
Yay! Depression.
Depression. The epigraph for this chapter reads, "Let me first assure you that the element is quite safe. I have found a good home for it. I protect its safety like I protect my own skin, you might say." And that is the epigraph for this chapter. The morning after Kaladin's decision at the Honor Chasm, he rose before the other bridgemen. He threw open the door, letting in the sunlight and waking up the members of Bridge 4. Kaladin shouted for them to get up and organized. The men just look at him in confusion. They're like, "What are you talking about?" Kaladin yells at them to form ranks or he'll haul them out one by one. Some men stared at him confused. Others just went back to sleep. Kaladin went over to one of the stronger Alethi men that had gone back to sleep, Moash. He grabbed him by the arm and pulled him to his feet. Moash told Kaladin to storm off, and Kaladin punched him in the gut. Then he picked Moash up and carried him outside. The rest of the camp was awake, except for the bridgemen. They were allowed to sleep in unless they had morning bridge runs. Kaladin walked back into the barracks and yelled that he'd do that to each of them. The bridgemen got up and filed out of the barracks. Kaladin tells them that things are going to change in Bridge 4. They won't sleep in anymore. A Makabaki man named Sigzil asked what they were going to do instead. Kaladin tells them that they will train, that they will practice running the bridges to strengthen up. He says they probably just wanted to relax, to which a man named Leighton agrees. I'm throwing all these names out there because these people are going to be not like super important characters, but they're going to show up a lot. So their names are going to be repeated a ton. Kaladin says that the bridge runs are so bad because they spend most of the day lounging. If they get stronger, they're more likely to survive. He says he intends for Bridge 4 to never lose another man. The bridgemen stared at Kaladin, and then one started to laugh. He was an Unkalaki, simply called Horn Eater by most. He was tan with red hair and was nearly 7 feet tall. Super built. His name was Rock. "Crazy," said the Horn Eater, "is Crazy Man who now thinks to lead us." The others started to laugh, and laughter spren began to appear. Moash calls out to Gaz, asking if they have to listen to Kaladin. Gaz says that bridge leaders only have authority in the field. Moash tells Kaladin to storm off again, and the men wander off. Syl points out how it didn't go well, and Kaladin agrees, and glares at Gaz. He says that his men in Amaram's army had been inexperienced, but not insubordinate. These bridgemen had nothing to lose. He thinks he's lucky he got them outside at all. Syl asks what they're going to do next, and Kaladin just starts walking towards Gaz. And Gaz runs. Kaladin asks Syl to follow Gaz. She smiles and then takes off after him. Syl zips back a short time later and tells Kaladin that Gaz was hiding between two of the barracks. Kaladin took the long way around and crept up behind Gaz. He put his hand on the man's shoulder. Gaz swung around and tried to punch Kaladin, but Kaladin caught his fist. Gaz looked up at Kaladin with horror, and then I'm gonna read again from the book because this interaction is just too good. It starts with Gaz saying, "I wasn't gonna lie. Storm you. You don't have authority anywhere other than on the field. If you hurt me again, I'll have you." "Calm yourself, Gaz," Kaladin said, releasing the man. "I'm not gonna hurt you. Not yet, at least." "Today's third pass," Kaladin said. "Payday. You get your pay in an hour like everyone else." "No, you have it now. I saw you talking to the courier there." Kaladin held out his hand. Gaz pulled out a pouch and counted spheres. Tiny, white lights shone at their centers. Diamond marks, each worth 5 diamond chips. A single chip would buy a loaf of bread. Kaladin counted out 4 marks, handed them to Kaladin, but Kaladin left his hand open. "The other one, Gaz." "You said, now." Gaz pulled out a sphere. "You have a strange way of keeping your word, lordling. You promised me." He trailed off as Kaladin took the sphere he'd just been given and handed it back. "Don't forget where this comes from, Gaz. I'll keep to my word, but you aren't keeping part of my pay. I'm giving it to you. Understand?" Gaz took the sphere. "The money stops coming if something happens to me," Kaladin said. "Remember our bargain. Stay out of our way." It's such a good power move from Kaladin. It's such a tiny thing of like, no, you're not taking one of my spheres. I'm giving it to you. So you give me my full pay, and then I give you one back. I think that's a very smart thing to do. Gaz says that he won't lie for Kaladin. Kaladin said he only expects Gaz to do what he said. Then asks for Bridge 4's schedule for the day. The morning would be open. The crew would go out and lose their spheres on gambling or prostitutes. A wasted day. Kaladin turned to walk away. Gaz yelled that Kaladin won't change anything. The men are bridgemen for a reason. Kaladin ignored him. Gaz yelled that Kaladin didn't have any authority, and Kaladin said Gaz was wrong. Authority didn't come from rank. Syl asked where it came from, and Kaladin says, "From the men who give it to you. That's the only way to get it." Kaladin asks Syl if she sleeps, and she's like, "Why would Spren sleep?" And he asks her to watch over him while he's sleeping so Gaz doesn't try to have Kaladin killed. Syl asks if Gaz would even do something like that, and Kaladin says probably not. He'll probably just wait for Kaladin to get killed on a bridge run. But he wants Syl watching just in case. Syl asks him what would happen if Gaz went to more important men, and Kaladin says that there's nothing he could do, but it would make Gaz look weak. The army rarely killed bridgemen, only if you didn't run. The bridgemen's lives were bad enough. If you pushed them any further, they'd just lie down and die. That meant that Kaladin didn't have much to motivate the bridgemen with. Kaladin goes to the lumber yard and finds a large plank that hadn't been put into a bridge yet. He asked if he could borrow the plank, and the carpenter seemed confused. Kaladin said he'd stay in the yard with it, and the carpenter says that they're going to need the plank back eventually. Kaladin takes the plank and practiced running with it. The carpenter he talked to brought over a supervisor. The two watched for a moment before walking away. Soon, Kaladin drew a crowd. Many of the bridgemen made fun of him, but the members of Bridge 4 watched quietly. Grizzled Teft and young Dunny among them. The stairs pushed Kaladin forward. Kaladin's anger also pushed him forward. He ran for hours until lunch. He ran over to the carpenter station and drank from their water. They usually chased away bridgemen who did that, but they said nothing to Kaladin. He nodded to 2 carpenters and then jogged back to his plank. Rock was lifting it, frowning. Teft said that Rock had bet them that Kaladin was using a lighter board to impress them. Rock watched in bewilderment as Kaladin took the plank and returned it to where he'd found it, thanking the apprentice he'd taken it from. Rock was paying the bridgemen when Kaladin returned. Kaladin dismisses them for lunch and says that they have bridge duty in the afternoon. He then walked away. Then, when he was far enough, he ducked into an alleyway and leaned against the wall. Wheezing, he sank to the ground. His fingers were too weak to form a fist. He gasped and coughed. The soldier checked in, but left when he saw that it was just a bridgeman. Syl appeared and said she had to tell him something, and he ignores her. She said that this was important and stung his eye. She says that she's glad he kept his word to Gaz about the spheres. Kaladin seems confused, but still insists that it's important. Kaladin says he's too exhausted to try and decipher what she means, and she says that she's freaked out that she knows what a lie is now, that she's changing. She asks him if he was going to kill himself when she found him near the chasm. Kaladin didn't reply. She brings up the leaf she'd brought him and how he could have used it to kill himself. She's freaked out that she understands death. Kaladin says that she's always been an odd but then remembers that at the beginning she'd acted like a normal Windspren. She asks what's happening to her, and Kaladin asks if it matters. He says he doesn't know what he is, a bridgeman, a surgeon, a soldier, a slave. You just have to keep moving. She asks if he's mad that she brought him the leaf, and he says that if she hadn't shown up when she did, he probably would have killed himself. Bringing the leaf was just what he needed in that moment. Syl smiled at that. Kaladin stretched and walked back out onto the street. She zipped after him and landed on his shoulder. She was glad he wasn't angry. She says that she thinks he's the reason she understands lies and death now. He makes a sarcastic comment about how he brings death and lies wherever he goes. She recognizes his sarcasm and then gets a devious look in her eyes and goes, "I know sarcasm." And Kaladin goes, "Oh, that's worrying." He asks if what's happening between them has ever happened before, and she says she can't remember anything further back than when she met him a year ago. Kaladin asks if maybe she'll forget again and go through a cycle. She says that idea makes her uncomfortable. She doesn't want to be like a normal Windspren. Kaladin says he understands how she feels, and then they go on so Kaladin can get lunch. And that was chapter 14. So Kaladin is trying to whip the bridgeman into shape, but there's not a whole lot he can actually do. We're meeting the colorful cast of Bridge 4, who will be with us for a long time. Well, some of them will be with us for a long time. They aren't a bridge crew, so, you know. But
the
Bridge
ones
4
you
is
named
essential.
are probably going to be with us for a long time.
I would not take that to be fact.
Or maybe not. Let me guess, Rock is gonna die, but the rest of them will probably survive.
How dare you say that about my favorite Unkalaki? I'll just say Bridge 4 is a really big part of the Stormlight Archive. The members might change over time, but the concept of what Kaladin is building here is a really central part of his story arc. The Bridge 4 has a salute, which is like the Wakanda salute, but at the wrists instead of the forearms. And it does predate the Wakanda salute. The Bridge 4 salute did appear in the books before Black Panther came out, so fun fact about Bridge 4. We'll go for a little bit longer. Chapter 15, The Decoy. We're back to the Kolins. And this epigraph reads, "You do not agree with my quest. I understand that so much as it is possible to understand someone with whom I disagree so completely." And that is the end of the epigraph. We start in Adolin's POV. It's been 4 hours since the Chasm Fiend attack, and Adolin was overseeing the cleanup. The Chasm Fiend had wrecked their bridge back, and they could have just gone around a long way back to camp, but Dalinar had made the call to rest and tend to the wounded. Sadeas had disagreed. There was laughter coming from the pavilion. The king had brushed aside the casualties, saying they'd be honored in the heraldic forces. Dalinar stood off to the side, staring eastward. The view of Dalinar holding back the Chasm Fiend was stuck in Adolin's mind. The other Light Eyes had held their tongues after the display, but it wouldn't last. Adolin just wanted Dalinar to be the man he'd once been. We cut to Dalinar's POV. Dalinar is staring out in the direction of the Parshendi camp. Alethkar had been in this siege for nearly 6 years. Dalinar had suggested the strategy himself. A full-on assault on the Parshendi would have been too dangerous. With the Alethi camped on the edges, the Parshendi had no way out. It had been a good plan, but Dalinar hadn't expected the gem hearts. He wanted to check on his men, but needed to show trust in Adolin. And here we go. Let's get into some Dalinar stuff. I'm going to read this directly from the book. Dalinar smiled, looking at his son. Adolin was shorter than Dalinar, and his hair was blonde mixed with black. The blonde was an inheritance from his mother, or so Dalinar had been told. Dalinar himself remembered nothing of the woman. She had been excised from his memory, leaving strange gaps and foggy areas. Sometimes he could remember an exact scene with everyone else crisp and clear, but she was a blur. He couldn't even remember her name. When others spoke it, it slipped from his mind like a part of like a piece of butter sliding off a too hot knife.
Huh.
So Dalinar does not remember his wife for some reason. And that's why I didn't say her name earlier. But it's not that he has bad memory of a certain time period. It's specifically
been
her.
taken from him.
Yes, he says that it's been excised from his mind, like her specifically. Like he can imagine like moments with her, but he can't remember the her part of it.
That's kind of scary to think about. Like,
it's
imagine
very
that being
scary,
you,
right? It's very scary. Dalinar approached the corpse of the Chasm Fiend. Most gem hearts were acquired more easily. The Chasm Fiends would climb up on a plateau and form a chrysalis. That's when the Alethi would come to cut out the gem heart. Easy. This happened several times a week. So, you remember in Kaladin's first bridge run, when it was done, he saw the soldiers like hacking away at a chrysalis?
Mm-hmm.
And they ripped something out of it?
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. They were getting at the gem heart. Spren flew around the dead creature. Nobody knew what Spren they were, but they only appeared around newly killed great shells. The gem hearts had changed the war. Once a Chasm Fiend was spotted, it became a race between the Alethi and Parshendi to acquire it. The High Princes competed against each other for the gem hearts as well. They would race to be the first to arrive. Vorinism taught that the finest warriors would have the holy privilege of joining the heralds after death, fighting to reclaim the Tranquiline halls from the Voidbringers. The High Princes were allies, but they were also rivals. Dalinar worried. The goal of avenging Gavilar had been forgotten. The Alethi played a game instead. The Parshendi had taken credit for Gavilar's murder, but never gave a reason. There was a small chance a high storm would come tonight. With high storms came visions. The words appeared in his mind again. Unite them. He wasn't sure he believed in what he'd seen in them. Dalinar saw Sadeas, who caught his eye and nodded. He had done his part. Dalinar had a reason for bringing High Prince Vama on the hunt. I mentioned that High Prince Vama was coming with them, and now we're going to get to why. Dalinar entered the king's pavilion. He saw Adolin trying to listen in on Elhokar and Sadeas. Dalinar went to find Vama, but Elhokar called out first, telling Dalinar to come over with him and Sadeas, who was bragging about the gem hearts he'd won. Elhokar chastises Dalinar on his lack of gem hearts and tells him that if he used Sadeas' bridges, he'd win more. Dalinar says he's been busy with other important things, and Sadeas asks what could possibly be more important than vengeance. Dalinar said nothing, but Elhokar told Dalinar to use Sadeas' bridges. Dalinar refuses, since they waste many lives. Dalinar uses wheeled bridges that took much longer. So, Dalinar doesn't have crews like Bridge 4 to run his bridges. He has wheeled bridges. Yes. You can like Dalinar a little bit if you want. He's not that terrible that he would use the bridge crews. Dalinar says that the codes say that a general shouldn't ask his men to do anything he wouldn't do for himself, and asks Sadeas if he'd run his own bridges. Sadeas says the bridgemen are important as they distract the Parshendi by giving them easy targets. He says that the bridgemen weren't worth as much as a shard bearer. The things Sadeas said were directly at odds with the Way of Kings. The last words Gavilar had written had been a quote from the ancient book.
Huh. You said that the names of the books are the names of actual books in the series.
Yes,
right?
they are. Yes, they are. The Way of Kings. Brother, you must find the most important words a man can say. Dalinar says that sometimes the prize is not worth the cost. Sadeas could not believe what he'd heard. Even Adolin and Renarin seemed shocked. Dalinar had been very un-Alethi lately. Sadeas says that the prize is worth any cost. Dalinar reminds him that they're fighting a war, not a contest, and Sadeas says that everything is a contest. That implies that Dalinar will fail as he is weak. And then I'm going to read from the book again here. My father is one of the most renowned warriors in Alethkar, Adolin snapped. You saw what he did earlier, Sadius. While you were hiding back by the pavilion with your bow, my father held off the beast. You're a coward. Adolin, Dalinar said. Restrain yourself. Adolin itched to summon his shard blade. Renarin put a hand on his shoulder, and Adolin backed down. Sadius smirked. One son can barely control himself, and the other is incompetent. This is your legacy, old friend. I am proud of them both, Sadius, whatever you think. The firebrand I can understand, Sadius said. You were once impotent just like him. But the other one? You saw how he ran out onto the field today. He even forgot to draw his sword or bow. He's useless. Adolin thrust his hand to the side again, stepping forward towards Sadius. Adolin, Dalinar said, I will handle this. Sadius. I fuck up Sadius' name so often, as you can tell. It's such a fucking weird name to say. Sadius. Surely I did not just hear you openly, before the king, call my son useless. Surely you would not say that, as such an insult would demand that I summon my blade and seek your blood. Shatter the Vengeance Pact, because the king's two greatest allies, causing the king's two greatest allies to kill one another. Surely you would not have been that foolish. Surely I misheard. Perhaps, Sadius said, you did hear the wrong words. I would not insult your son. That would not have been wise of me. They nodded to each other. They would not let their hatred become a danger to the king. Elhokar finally spoke up. He let the high princes fight amongst themselves. He thought it made them stronger. Dalinar disagreed. The voice flashed in his head again. Unite them. Elhokar dismisses the prior conflict. Adolin had wanted Dalinar to summon his blade and challenge Sadius. The thrill tempted Dalinar, but he pushed it down. He couldn't do that while Elhokar needed him. Sadius takes another shot at Dalinar and Elhokar shuts him down. And again, I'm going to read directly from the book because Wit is here and you just,
Wit.
You can't try to summarize what Wit says. Quite enough, you say, a new voice added. I believe that a single word from Sadius is quite enough for anyone. Wit joined the group. Wit, Elhokar exclaimed. When did you get here? I caught up to your party just before the battle, your majesty, Wit said. I was going to speak with you, but the chasm fiend beat me to you. I hear your conversation with it was rather energizing. But you arrived hours ago then. What have you been doing? How could I have missed seeing you here? I had things to be about, Wit said, but I couldn't stay away from the hunt. I wouldn't want you to lack for me. I've done well so far, and yet you were still witless, Wit said. Dalinar didn't know what to make of Wit. He was too free with his thoughts. He thought that there was something strange about this Wit. Bright Lord Sadius, Wit said, I'm terribly sorry to see you here. I should think, Sadius said, that you would be happy to see me. I seem always to provide you with such entertainment. That is unfortunately true, Wit said. Unfortunately? Yes. You see, Sadius, you make it too easy. An uneducated, half-brained serving boy with a hangover could make mock of you. I am left with no need to exert myself, and your very nature makes mockery of my mockery. And so it is that through sheer stupidity you make me look incompetent. Really, Elhokar, Sadius said. Must we put up with this creature? I like him, Elhokar said, smiling. He makes me laugh. At the expense of those who are loyal to you? Expense? Wit cut in. Sadius, I don't believe you've ever paid me a sphere. Though, no, please don't offer. I can't take your money, as I know how many others you must pay to get what you wish of them. Sadius flushed, but kept his temper. A horror joke, Wit? Is that the best you can manage? Wit shrugged. I point out truths when I see them, Bright Lord Sadius. Each man has his place. Mine is to make insults. Yours is to be insluts. It's so... Sadius froze, then grew red-faced. You are a fool. If the Wit is a fool, then it is a sorry state for men. I shall offer you this, Sadius. If you can speak, yet say nothing ridiculous, I will leave you alone for the rest of the week. Well, I think that shouldn't be too difficult. And yet you failed, Wit said, sighing. For as you said, I think, and I can imagine nothing so ridiculous as the concept of you thinking. What of you, young Prince Renarin? Your father wishes me to leave you alone. Can you speak, yet say nothing ridiculous? Renarin hesitated, then said, nothing ridiculous. Wit laughed. Yes, I suppose that will satisfy me. Very clever. If Bright Lord Sadius could lose control of himself and finally kill me, perhaps you can be King's Wit in my stead. You seem to have the mind for it. Renarin perked up, which just upset Sadius more. Sadius reached for his sword. Wit stepped forward. So what of it, Sadius? You going to do Alethkar a favor and rid it both of us? Rid it of us both. You could kill the Wit, but you'd have to forfeit your title and lands. If you could assassinate the Wit without anyone knowing, though... Sadius let go of his sword. Elhokar tells Wit that he doesn't need to torment Sadius, and Wit says he disagrees. The king asks Dalinar if he checked into an issue Elhokar had raised earlier. Dalinar says he will look into it now. The king nodded, then hastened off after Sadius. And that is where we will leave off for now.
I love him.
I figured you would.
Wit I love him.
Is very good. When I was taking notes for this, I'd forgotten about the insults in sluts joke. And I think that's my favorite piece of wordplay. One of my favorite pieces of wordplay that he does.
I love him.
He's real good, isn't he? I have literally since episode 1 been looking forward to Wit's introduction.
Did Brandon Sanderson himself come up with these things? Because holy cow.
I think Sanderson's a funny person. People disagree. I think Sanderson is really hit or miss with his comedy sometimes, but I tend to enjoy I've enjoyed his comedy in most everything except for his superhero series. His superhero series, his comedy was the main character made a lot of bad metaphors, and it got old really quickly to me. But I think Wit is a very entertaining character. But yeah, so when I remember how I was like, they tried to do like an entire part's worth of characterization for the new POVs really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you have an idea of who Adolin and Dalinar are.
Not quite.
Not quite. I think the best way I can sum it up is Adolin's a himbo, and Dalinar. How to sum up Dalinar? Dalinar is old, is I think how I would sum it up.
Old soul or just old?
Dalinar, I would not say that Dalinar is like old by our standards, but Adolin is like 23, so Dalinar is somewhere around 50 something, 50 to 60. Maybe high 40s. So he's not super old in our perception of it, but like for a fantasy world like this, mm-hmm. then I would say that he's an older general that's a bit past his prime, but still can hold back a fucking chasm fiend.
Mm-hmm. What a man.
What a man, for real. Renarin is my favorite character in the entire series. We'll get more of him later. They don't give him a whole lot, but what he gets, I really like him. I think he's very different from everybody else. They mention he has a blood weakness. So I think it's interesting. It's an interesting like character to have among all these warriors, especially in a culture like the Alethi, which is very war focused, right? To have the second youngest son of the head of one of the princedoms be a person who can't fight. Mm-hmm. I think is interesting. I don't know if I mentioned it, but he also wears glasses.
Okay.
I don't think I mentioned that he wears glasses, but he does. I don't know if the book mentioned that he wears glasses yet, but he does. I find Renarin to be at odds with the rest of the setting around him, and I think that's why I find him very fascinating. So you like Wit?
I love him.
You're intrigued by Dalinar and his missing wife? His literally missing memory of his wife?
Yes.
Head empty himbo Adolin.
Head empty only girls.
Only girls. And he flirts with them in front of each other like a moron.
Yeah.
He's not very smart.
I can tell.
What do you think of the king?
He is trying to look brave, but he's just being stupid.
Yeah. He's not very smart. What, you don't have a whole lot to go off of yet. I mean, you have nothing to go off of yet. But, I'm just gonna summarize what we've got so far from the letter. I'm gonna reread what we have so far from the letter. So, what we've read so far in this letter is, "Old friend, I hope this missive finds you well. Though as you are now essentially immortal, I would guess that wellness on your part is something of a given. I realize that you are probably still angry. That is pleasant to know. Much as your perpetual health, I have come to rely upon your dissatisfaction with me. It is one of the Cosmere's great constants, I should think. Let me first assure you that the element is quite safe. I have found a good home for it. I protected safety like I protect my own skin, you might say. You do not agree with my quest. I understand that, so much as it is possible to understand someone with whom I disagree so completely." And that's what we've gotten so far from this letter. I will point out, whoever is writing this letter mentions the Cosmere. Which is not something that most people would be aware of. Because, I mean, that essentially means that he's aware of the greater universe. And I am, I guess, giving something away by saying it's a he, but anyways.
Huh.
I'm giving away the gender of the person writing it, but...
I doubt that's gonna matter that much. Right now.
Yeah, no. You know me, I try to be careful.
Is it... Wait, could it be that same dude that you were telling me about before? The, like, Nick Fury of the Cosmere? Is it that dude?
That is a very good guess. You, will find out. Rafa, read and find out. No, I like this epigraph a lot better than just the quotes. I think the quotes are cool, and especially when you look back at them, you can understand what they mean. But I think that the letter is more interesting on first read than the quotes are.
Probably, yeah.
Anyways, that's all I have for now. Is there anything that I didn't mention that you can think of that you want to bring up besides how much you love Wit?
I love him.
He's great. He's real good. All right, Mango. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitch at Mango Asteroid. Where can people find you, Shawn?
You guys can follow me on Twitter at Shawn_AFK. Everything that I do is in my bio. You guys can follow this podcast on Twitter. You can follow it at Speak Stormlight. My fucking voice is going. At Speak Stormlight. We host a show on Anchor at anchor.fm/ I've been saying it wrong. It is anchor.fm/speak the words, but it has spaces, so it's speak-the-words. We're on a bunch of other podcast platforms, like, if I can open up the Anchor to look at it, like Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify. That is everything I have for now. I'm gonna try a new thing where instead of putting the whole life before death stuff at the beginning, I'm gonna try ending the podcast with them. That might work a little bit better. Let me see. What can I tease you about next time? What little nugget can I give you about next time? Next time we're gonna find out more about what happened the night Gavilar died.
Oh.
But until then, everybody, remember, life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination.